last week, what were we talking about?
Parables.
Yeah. What were some of the parables we did?
Oh, yeah. The mustard seed. Trying to think of the other.
We're at the mustard seed and yeast.
The pearl.
And the pearl.
Well, hey, we got a Ron and a Sherry. This is wonderful.
Yay.
We got them on mute, but we've got them. So this is good. And am I crazy? Ron, have you been working on that beard for a while? It feels new, but it looks very filled in.
Yeah, as long as you have, you probably gave up and shaved, didn't you?
I did. It got too hot. Hot and scratchy. So, well, it's good to see you all. We're just catching up from last week. Oh boy, you missed a doozy. I don't know about you all. We've had some great conversations, but last week was just one of my favorites. I was so grateful to see the creativity and the depth that you guys were willing to do. Ron and Sherry, we were in Matthew 13, and we were looking at some of the different parables. We were talking about the parable of the yeast, of the mustard seed, and of the pearl of great price, or rather the merchant. So boy, oh boy, if you have a spare hour and you want to go on the church's YouTube channel, it was a good one. It was a really, really good one. So that puts us today. There's just a little bit of text that I really wanted to catch at the end of chapter 13. And so I would invite you, for us, was there anybody who'd be willing to read Matthew chapter 13, verses 54 through 58?
I will. Unless anybody else wants to. Coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in their synagogue, and they were amazed. Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers, they asked. Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary, and aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all these things? And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town and in his own home. And he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith.
Okay, so I wanted to make sure we included this because there's some interesting details going on here. Did anything jump out at you? New or different than what you expected?
Well, that the people who are closest to him have the least amount of trust in him.
Yeah, what's that about? Why do you think that is? And apparently Jesus has already like a saying, you know, prophets are not without honor except in their own country and in their own house. It seems like he was almost prepared for this. Why would he say that? Or what do you think he's trying to get at?
He's trying to get their attention.
Okay. Sounds like he had it. Sounds like he definitely got it. That's good. What else? Why did the people who were closest to him seem to be the least effective of his ministry?
I think it's because they already had an opinion of him if they watched him grow up, and so they didn't want to change or surprised.
Amen. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a reason why Jesus was kind of expecting this. I'm curious, have you ever had this have you ever experienced this? Or been in a situation where you saw it take place where somebody is discounted by their hometown people, or you have people have already made a preconceived judgment about somebody before, for those that grew up with, and so it's hard for people to see someone in a new light. I'll say for me, to give an example, my grandma always saw me as a singer. She loved when I would sing. That was her favorite thing. And her dream for me was to become a professional singer. And so this whole ministry thing, she's like, well, that's nice, but you know, your real thing is singing. And so for her, she was always seeing me in that light. And it was hard for her to see me as something different or something new.
I think we probably do it a lot if we go back to a high school reunion.
Yeah.
Because we knew the kids in high school, and it's like, wow, look how they turned out, or whatever.
Yeah. Have you ever defied somebody's expectations? You know, have you ever found yourself somebody saying, oh, well, Dan Winkenwerder, I didn't think, oh, what do you mean? I thought you were the guy always starting dumpster fires. I didn't think you were going to be putting out fires. Come on. You know, you ever defy some expectations?
Probably, but I'm not sure. I mean, when I was in high school, some people probably knew that, you know, I was going to go to college. I studied forestry. And so to not work after you go back and to not work in that field, I think that surprised some of them, but I don't know. I was only at our high school for the last 2 years, so I didn't have real long connections with people there.
He was really quiet, really shy, so.
So they didn't know what to expect of him.
Some of them.
Any others? Have any of the rest of you either experienced where either someone close to you surprised you, or you felt like somebody had? Because in this case, it seems with my understanding of this, well, how would you characterize the crowd's response? Are they happily surprised? Are they, what was their notion of Jesus? What was their expectation of him?
Well, it says they took offense at him. I mean,
why do you think they did that?
It says that they were amazed at his wisdom, but they didn't understand where he got it. That was a disconnect there somehow.
which is hard to understand because he was preaching in the synagogue at 12. I mean,
True.
it's like, why didn't these people know he was special? I mean,
yeah, that's true. He did. Although that was him. Remember, that was him. He was in the temple. He was in Jerusalem.
right.
And so here he's coming back to Nazareth. So
Right.
maybe the hometown folk, although I'm sure Mary and Joseph, after they went home and they're like, so we lost our kid for 3 days. Whoops. I'm sure they told some of their friends. But yeah, so
But still, he had to have had, you know, that kind of wisdom and just that differentness about him. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there was jealousy going on. I don't know. It just kind of surprises me that.
at the same.
Well, I think a lot of times you don't really think of a child as, you know, you don't really listen to them and really hear what they're saying, and maybe that was part of it, that they didn't really pay attention to him when he was growing up as much.
Oh, I love that. I mean, how many times have we either been on the receiving or the giving end of not taking somebody fully seriously because we've known them in the childhood days, and that's how we primarily think of them. For example, when I was, one of the first years I was a camp counselor, I mean, I was only a teenager at the time, but one of the first years I was a camp counselor at Kaleo, I remember there was a little 3rd grade camper. She was like skinny as a rail, Steph Floth, and she was wild, loud, rambunctious. She actually, and even though she was super tiny, she challenged me and this other big teenager to a pizza eating contest. And we were all so stubborn that we ate way too much pizza. And my friend and I, who were counselors, like after lunch, there's an hour nap time. We call it, it's the best time, FOB, feed on bunk time. And so every day at every church camp, in case you're ever asked to counsel, know that there's a built-in nap. But after the nap time, my buddy and I were kind of getting up just like, oh, I'm still so full. I feel disgusting. And I look out, and there's little Steph Law swinging on a tire swing, just going in circles. And I just wanted to throw up. See, it got me so sick. But now she's actually my neighbor, Steph Anderson. And she is a teacher. And she is her spouse is military, and she is responsible and quiet and orderly. And I'm like, sometimes when she talks, all I can hear is the 3rd grade wild, crazy little girl. But I'm like, no, this is a different person. This is, a grown adult who's grown and matured and changed. And I need to give her the space to do that. But I have my prejudices of still seeing the little 3rd grader on the tire swing.
Well, and he came from a carpenter's family. He was just, they were just normal people. I mean, and his brothers and sisters, and, we know his mom, Mary, and, you don't think of people that you grow up with, as becoming, really special people, or he had powers, and so they just saw him as one of them.
Yeah, I still keep thinking, have you ever seen the movie The Life of Brian, that old Monty Python? No one here has seen Life of Brian?
Nope.
Seen the Holy Grail, and that was enough.
Oh, it's a really funny, it's the story of Brian, Jesus's overlooked younger brother. And so like, you're always on the periphery of Jesus's ministry, but it's from Brian's perspective. If you have a good sense of humor and feel like your faith is strong enough and that's funny to you, there's some really, really great stuff in there. Including the best little take on the Sermon on the Mount, where because there's no speakers, Jesus is doing the Sermon on the Mount, but Brian's stuck way back at the back, and people are like playing telephone to relay. And at one point they're saying, "What did he say?" He said, "Blessed are the cheese makers." Somebody says, "The cheese makers? Why them?" And somebody said, "No, he isn't saying to take it literally. He means all dairy producers in general." just weird, silly stuff. But yeah, can we pause on this? Did anybody grow up being told that Jesus was an only child? Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know what you think.
Maybe we had.
Well, that's good, because this is one of the very few times Yeah, this is pretty much one of 2 times, I believe, in the entire Gospels where siblings of Jesus are mentioned. So, so this is kind of a unique thing to have it in there. But yeah, it sounds like typical of the culture. Typical of the culture, it sounds like there are 5 boys in his family, and we don't even know how many girls because
Yeah.
the cult, they don't get names. They don't even get, oh, and your 3 sisters or your, no, it's just, you know, and you got some sisters. Shows the care and the importance of women in that culture and in that time.
Well, Steve, I wonder if he was such a quiet man, he didn't stand out in the crowd. They had to stop and think about who he was. I really wonder that. He wasn't that much older than his brothers. Couldn't have been.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think he was. Yeah. Yeah.
That maybe the community just thought of him as one of the pack. The boys, you know, the 4 or 5 boys running around town together. But
Well, what about the fact that none of them had seen him perform any miracles? Hadn't done any in his hometown. So they had heard about it, but they hadn't seen it. So if you don't see it, you don't believe it.
Have you ever, so I'll give you one more example. I have an acquaintance. We went to high school together. We used to sing together. He was the biggest goof off, just never paid attention to anything, kind of a class clown, screwball. But now he is one of the premier photographers for National Geographic. And when he told me that, I couldn't get over that he was employed, much less an incredible, you know, one of those where I was like, you've got to be kidding me. What? And it just, I had a certain expectation of this person, but it turned out he was just needing the right niche to fall into, and it really, really fit him. Have you ever had a time, I don't even know with everyone, where are folks' hometowns? You know, have you ever been back? Do you have connections to your hometowns?
No.
Ron, where's your hometown? Or where was it?
Hines, Oregon, eastern part of Oregon, where they have 1 person every 2 square miles. So they don't worry about COVID so much out there.
But you don't have much connection there?
No, I went back a couple times during on summers while I was in college. The only reason I went back is because I knew I could get a job in the lumber mill. And that was it. But after about my 3rd year, I never went back. I worked for the railroad out here in the ice house for 2.5, 3 years. And after that, Fort Sill, went to Fort Hood, and I went to Vietnam. No reason to go home.
Yeah.
And we just kind of fell by the wayside. I didn't go to any class reunions until the 50th, because they always held them in the summertime when I was at annual training for the reserves.
Yeah, I get that. I skipped I'm a Lincoln Southeast grad, and I skipped my 10th because I had enough. I was getting ordained and married and graduating from div school all in the same 6 months, and I was like, I don't need a high school reunion. I'll hit the 20th. Well, this year was the 20th, so kind of missed that one thanks to COVID. So I don't know when the next one will be, but yeah, I've never done the whole high school reunion thing. How about anybody else have a connection to your hometown?
I'm a military brat.
I grew up in North Platte, and we went back a lot when my parents still lived there. but they had moved to Lincoln about 13 years ago. And so there's no more relatives that live there anymore. So we haven't been back for quite a while.
Mm. Barb, were you about to share something?
This
too?
is my hometown, so
So you've
I,
been back, I see.
I am back. Well, I did go to school. I went to college in Manhattan, Christian College in Manhattan, Kansas. And so then this kind of goes with what we were talking about earlier. I had to prove that I could make something of myself. My family believed that I was always going to stay at home and I was never going to amount to anything because I was like Dan, I was quiet. And so I started doing youth trips with our youth group. I went to UNL for a semester. I didn't even go to college that winter semester because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I waited. And so then I started doing helping with the youth group and did this youth trip and just decided I wanted to go to MCC. And my parents fought me on it. My dad especially, he didn't want me to go. He's like, well, we can go visit. I said, no, if I go, I'm staying. And I packed up all my stuff and we went out there and I was there for 4.5 years and then I graduated and came back. So
Well, boy, it sounds like that was such a formative thing, an important thing for you to feel
it was
like.
it was very good for me to be away, to get away, to prove to myself and to my family that I was strong enough to do it, basically.
Oh, and so I think that's really great. And I think that kind of connects to me with kind of what the struggle that Jesus is having here in his hometown. I mean, the people don't even give Jesus a name. Where did this man get his wisdom? And then, oh, wait, that's Mary and Joe's boy. Oh, we knew him. I don't know. I think sometimes that's the struggle when returning to a hometown or to when you aren't allowed to form your own identity, but you're seen as somebody else's kid or somebody else's sibling or somebody else's, I think it goes to show that until we can see the full humanity of someone as a unique person, we're going to be missing out on their gifts. And this may not be exactly what the scripture is talking about, but the more we've talked about it, it's made me think of everything that's happening in the world right now between movements for LGBTQ rights, movements, literally where we're not seeing names said. In the Black Lives Matter, the importance of saying names of victims and recognizing full personhood, that we need to recognize everyone is a person, a full, complex, unique, beloved child of God. And just in the same way that Barb, you needed to show that you could be independent and capable on your own, that if we deny people their names or deny people their full identities, we miss out on so much. And so that's a part, I think, of what Jesus is teaching in his context.
Well, I think the people in his hometown also saw him as a carpenter, because that's all they knew that what he was. And then when he left, well, he left. What's he doing? And they hadn't heard back, or if they did, they couldn't believe it. And so therefore he was being seen as a carpenter and not a prophet and not an emissary from God, because they didn't believe. Right there at the end, it's almost like the saying in chapter 58 or verse 58, ye of little faith. And you just didn't have any faith.
Well, and two, that, so often we ascribe somebody's worth connected to their job. And so if they're saying, well, come on, this is just this is a carpenter. I don't want to hear your thoughts on God. Just get back to fixing my kitchen table. You know, I mean, we have certain expectations and we still do it. I'll say, as somebody who waited tables for a dozen years, there were many times where, like, I would overhear conversations, whether it was business conversations or philosophical conversations, and, you know, I might put my 2 cents in, and people would be really surprised and really like, but you're just the server. What do you know about that? It's like, did you think that I was less intelligent or less capable just because I'm waiting tables? You know, or you go the other way. I always loved, at least when I lived in New York and was waiting tables, people would say, now you're not just a server, are you? What else are you doing? Like, I think they were hoping to hear that I was like an actor or doing something else, but I always love to be like, no, I'm waiting tables. I'm waiting on you right now. That's what I'm doing. And I'm happy to do it, and I find a lot of joy in it. And so we don't need to ascribe people's worth based on whether it's their identity through their family system or through their job title. But to recognize, say what?
Color of their skin.
Color of their skin, their sexual identity.
Right.
All of those things. Great, this is good. I'm gonna make sure we get to, as we're kind of at the halfway point, so at the beginning of chapter 14 is kind of a side story, because at the beginning, Matthew gives a lot of, if this were a movie, Matthew gives a lot of screen time to John the Baptist. In some Gospels, John the Baptist just has like a little cameo, but here, John the Baptist is a pretty strong supporting character. But we actually hear of how John the Baptist ends up getting killed, essentially as a parlor game for some of the elite. So we're going to kind of skip that part. But I want us to jump ahead, and if you're reading ahead, you may notice that we get to Jesus feeding the multitude. We'll actually get to that, I think, next week, because there are 2 stories of Jesus feeding the multitude in Matthew. We're going to jump ahead to Matthew 14, verses 22 to the end, to 33. Would somebody be willing to read Matthew 14, 22 through 33?
Yeah. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink. Cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God."
I don't know about you. I think this is one of the most evocative vignettes. It's so cinematic. It sticks in your heart. You know, how many times do we talk about walking on water? And yeah, here is this story. So so it starts with Jesus needing some alone time. Now, as I said, Jesus has just heard that his cousin John has been murdered. And Jesus needing some alone time, and he dismisses the crowds and he goes up to the mountain by himself to pray. So what do you hear in that, in those simple actions? What is this telling us about Jesus and what it means to be faithful? Or is there anything you take from that?
Are you talking about just the first few verses?
Just the first few verses.
Okay.
And maybe I'm being too leading. I don't know if any of you know people like this. I will say there are so many members of my family, and sometimes I myself, who are helpers, who want to help other people. And sometimes we're so focused. It's so easy to get so focused on either the needs of the world or the anxieties of the world or the needs of other people that we don't take time to pray for ourselves. We don't take time for our own grief.
Right.
We don't take time to rest. And Jesus knew he needed that. Even Jesus needed that time and that space and said, no, I need some alone time. Crowd, time to go. Disciples, get ahead. I'll catch up. I need some alone time. I think sometimes I've heard people be counseled by other well-meaning Christians being like, well, just believe, everything will be better, and it's going to be easy. Just power through it. But no, it's okay to grieve. It's okay, and it's good, and it's right to claim some time and some space for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where I was going there. It's a simple little thing in there, but I think it's an important thing to remember. You know, have you ever had to claim space for yourself or to help safeguard someone else to be able to have time, either just to breathe or to grieve, or anything like that?
I know when my dad died, my mom as well, actually, you know, I'm the only girl in the family of 4 boys. And so I just kind of took over and made things happen, and just, you know, it got to be rote. I did this, and then I did that, and then I did this. Just never really taking the time to grieve and to take my own time. You know, I let everybody else, you know, took care of everybody else. But I can remember, I think it was the night before a funeral, we were, you know, doing the pictures on the, you know, the boards and everything. And it was like it hit me like, oh my gosh, my mom died. I mean, she's gone. But before that, it was just, you know, you get wrapped up in doing and taking care of everybody. So I think you do have to, you know, take time for yourself and allow yourself to grieve, allow yourself to rest. And
Oh yeah. And maybe we've even done this before. I think of the doing. I'll never forget after Linda Baker died. Jim Baker he didn't have the language or want to use the language of grief or pain. I need to get her stuff out of here. Get some people over here. We got to get her stuff out of here. Let's clean it up. Let's go. We got to do it. We got to do it now. And it was clearly his grief, and it was clearly him seeing these reminders of her and just being so broken up. But he didn't want to deal with the grief. He didn't feel comfortable crying. He couldn't take it into prayer at that point. He did later. But for him, it was, we got to get the stuff out of here. Let's find something else to do. And I think that's so common, but kind of as you said, Diane, like grief will find if we don't make space for grief will interrupt our lives. Grief will find us, and you can't always guarantee where and when. It may be a time that you want it. It may not be. You may be in the middle.
Exactly. I mean, sometimes you think you've got to be strong, and I think that's a misnomer. We need to be able to realize that grieving and crying and, feeling those emotions it's strong. It's okay. Strong doesn't mean that you're in control of yourself all the time, but it's just my nature to, I can take care of this. I can take care of you. We're going to be okay. And, so.
Yes. Oh, what a good reminder. What a good reminder. Good. Thank you. So we have Jesus alone, and we have the disciples out on a lake in the middle of the night, almost morning, kind of pre-dawn, and all of a sudden, I love it's a ghost. That sounds like something that Finn would say, or I don't know. But we have these disciples scared to death, although if I saw a friend walking on water in the middle of the night out towards me, that might freak me out too. Because remember, this isn't Holmes Lake or some Nebraska pond. This is the Sea of Galilee. This is a pretty big lake. They must have been pretty far out in the middle, and so they see this. So what do you feel about the interactions? What happens between Jesus and Peter, and how do you feel about that? How do you see Peter's response? So what happens in this story with Peter and Jesus?
Well, I think first, Peter challenges Jesus. He says, if it's really you, then ask me to come out there. And so Jesus says, come. So Peter steps out of the boat, starts walking.
But Jesus had already said it was, yeah.
And he loses his faith all along the way, and he starts to sink. All of a sudden, instead of being ankle deep, he's up to his knees, and then he has to ask for help.
Yeah, and absolutely, Ron. And also what Diane was saying too about like Jesus starts by announcing, in my version it says take heart, but Kathy, I liked your version too of like have courage. Have courage. It's I. You don't need to be afraid. It's me, your friend. So often, messengers of God, prophets of God, Jesus himself meets people starting with peace, be not afraid, some sort of connection. I always like the whole thing there 365 times where either the voice of God, the messenger of God, an angel of God, or Jesus himself says, be not afraid. It's a daily reminder that we don't need to let fear be our first emotion. And that's such an important thing. Yeah, so then Jesus says to Peter, come on out. Or Peter says, hey, if it's you, tell me to come out. And Jesus says, yeah, come on out. And he does. And it's going well at first, and then he starts sinking.
But we have to, I'm sorry.
No, please, go ahead.
Now, I was just going to say, we do have to realize that he got out of the boat. Carly's dad used that very symbolism and story when we were trying to decide if we should actually open a bakery. Are we crazy? I mean, we were crazy, but, we just truly felt this was what God was leading us to do.
So you got out of the boat.
And he said, Peter never walked on the water till he got out of the boat. And it's like, get out of the boat. And so, we have to realize, yes, he started sinking. But he got out of the boat. I mean, how scary is that? I mean, that took faith, total faith right there.
Oh man, you know, it reminds me, and I can't remember the exact wording, but there's a that's how long it's been since I've been to the Y. There's a poster in one of the Y workout rooms that I love that's like, you know, second place, or you know, second place is better than last place. Last place means you've completed, and you know, starting, you know, and complete and trying is better than not starting at all. You know, it's so easy to always play it safe in life, to not get out of the boat,
Yeah.
not start something because we're afraid we may not be the best at it, or because we're afraid we're not going to win, or you know, has there been a time when you've, so Diane gives the great example of starting up the bakery. Has there been a time when you have, you know, stepped out of the boat, so to speak, really acted on faith on something that you were unsure about how it was going to end, but you went for it? Or conversely, is there a time when you thought about going for it, but you decided to stay in the boat? And that's okay too, to name it. But I'm assuming we've all had some moment like that. Maybe big, it may be small. But what invitations out of the boat have you had?
Well, I guess when I started with the schools, I didn't really know what being a para was exactly. I just knew that I had a degree in education. I was working at the grocery store in the deli, and I knew that's not what I wanted to do forever. I wanted to go back and do something in education, so I just went and applied, and still doing it now 20 years later. So
And that's a beautiful one. And I was even thinking about, you know, when I saw the little Zoom yellow box go to you, I was like, oh, Barb's going to talk again about school, because that was a
well,
big
that too. That would
stepping out moment. But that's another big one.
The one I can think of, I don't even remember how long ago it was, but Craig had come up to me and asked if I would lead the children's choir. And I don't have any degree in music or anything. I just really like to sing. And so I had to kind of decide if that was something that I could do or not. So.
And you did, and that's great. Yeah. Oh, what a wonderful example. I know for me, I mean, there are so many things that I feel like are long walks on water that I always have to ask for some help in. I mean, whether it's ministry, marriage, being a parent, you know, all of those things are definitely at times where it is easy to feel like you are sinking, you know, where you're going to have harder days where you're not sure that you can keep your head above water. But yeah, and I think in all of those, at some point, I had to take that step out of the boat. Yeah, so I think we all have those moments. We may not always, and I think if we don't name them as leaps of faith, as big steps of faith, I don't want us to miss out on it, because the things that you do and the choices that you make, whether it's children's church or starting a new job or going to school or choosing daily to be in a relationship, those are big things. That's not just like, oh, well, we sometimes treat it like, well, that's just my daily life. But that's a continual choice you make. And that's a big deal. So give yourself a little credit. I think that's a big thing. So what do we, I always love to pick on Peter because, he's usually the teacher's pet. He's like me. He likes to respond before he fully thinks through things. So how do you feel about his response? Yeah, he steps out in the boat, but he starts to sink. Does that mean he shouldn't have got out of the boat in the first place? Was it faithful?
Well, the wind came up, there's a little bit of disturbance there. Had Jesus just had just gotten to walk to Jesus, that's one thing, but yeah, had a little obstacle in the way. And what do we do? We do that so many times. We step out in faith and something comes along that kind of disturbs our balance, and we go, we start losing the faith that and we did that with the bakery. Even we had lots of obstacles, and there were times that we'd go, what did we do? How this was stupid. But then we would put our eyes back on Jesus, and he would say, oh, ye of little faith, hang in there. And we made it 3 years, and we're very proud of those 3 years. But you that's just natural. You something comes up to hit you, and you kind of stumble a little, but
Man, I love that night, and I think there is something important that the author has it so that that he's walking, and then the wind, the strong wind, when he noticed the wind may have been there the whole time, but he starts to notice it when he's out. And I love that, Diane, because we have to keep our eyes on the prize. It's like if you're ever walking across somewhere that's high up and you're fine, you just look at me, we're just going to go this way. Yeah. But then until you say those horrible, fateful words, don't look down, because then the first thing we do is look down. Yeah. And all of a sudden, then we get a little scared, it's a reminder of where is our focus.
And I always look at that. I've always looked at that, what Jesus said to him, as kind of a negative thing. Oh, you have little faith. Well, you know what? He had a little faith. The others didn't seem to have any.
Yeah, nobody else jumped out.
Yeah, at least he had a little faith. But I was like, gosh, Jesus, come on, give him a break. But maybe, oh, ye have little faith is not that negative. You had a little faith. Now just come on, keep trusting me. We're okay. I don't know.
Kind of more of a reminder. I'm still here is what he's saying.
Exactly.
And maybe Jesus is thinking, we're at about the halfway point in Jesus's ministry here. Maybe he's already thinking about, all right, after I'm gone, who's taking the lead in my church, in my movement? Peter, come on, man. You've got this, I don't know if you ever have anyone that you mentor or anyone that you have higher expectations of, there's a young pastor that I mentor, and we're old friends, and every now and again Caitlin's like, you were being too hard on him, and I try to become aware, but I see great possibility in him and know that like the things that he wants as well. You know, it's in the same way. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but sometimes those teachers that I had in college and in seminary, you know, I'll never forget the first time in high school that I had a teacher that I felt like she was making it harder for me than for some of the other students. And I went to complain after class to her. And she said, well, I have higher expectations for you. I think you can do more. You need to apply yourself. And so, yeah, I feel comfortable. I'm going to push you harder than I push some of the other students. And maybe that's O ye of little faith there. Maybe Jesus is thinking, come on, Peter, we can do this. I need you. Yeah. And then the final part of this little scene wraps up that when Jesus gets into the boat, now all of a sudden the wind ceases. Does this remind us of the other Jesus stilling the waters when he's in the boat? And then those in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. Now, I'm not exactly for sure, but I think this is I'll have to go back and look. I think this is the first time that the word worship is being said of the disciples. So what is it? What's the importance here? Why do you think all of a sudden this was the turning point for the disciples to worship Jesus, to say that he is the Son of God? He's not just a good rabbi. He's not a friend. He's not a wise teacher. This is the Son of God. What do you think that's about?
I don't know, before Jesus did a lot of things for other people and they observed that, but this was for them. He saved them, he calmed the sea for them. I don't know if that had something to do with it or not.
Yeah. And you know, he showed that you know, all the healings that he had done, you know, those weren't just parlor tricks, you know, to be able to help Peter, to help one of their own walk on water, was showing that, yeah, I agree, Dan, that I think that this time it's like, oh, this is for us too, and you can inspire us to do these things that are greater and bigger than ourselves. And again, we have Jesus here not only being a wise teacher, but we have Jesus as kind of controlling nature and the very laws of physics here. So we have that kind of supernatural Jesus as well in this scene. Yeah.
Well, and maybe it's because they saw both sides, like the human side of Jesus going up on the mountain to grieve and pray. And then they've also seen all these miracles around them. So they've seen both sides of who he is.
Yeah. And this is somebody who they've traveled with, they've shared lodging with, they've shared stories with. So they get this very human side, but also really, again, seeing the deeply holy and almost cosmic Jesus here. Sherry, I feel like you were getting ready to jump in.
Well, I thought, isn't it just like him to take us to a point where we feel like we're going to fail? And then he shows us that we should step out in faith, not walk by sight, but by faith. It's, for most of us, that's pivotal and brings great growth in our life. How would we move on to greater things if we don't grasp that point? Because our lives are not only physical, but they are spiritual. I remember thinking about how God really intervened for me. A private encounter with him in an elevator changed my life. Realizing that I had been doing everything in my own strength and not living in his strength. It gave me spiritual glasses. I could look at my life and see him moving in it and working, using me to help others. This is mostly about nursing, but it was so significant about my role on earth as his child. And I had to have this greater spiritual insight. He's the one who had to give it to me. I couldn't gain that for myself, just as the guys on the water had to see it happen. Jesus was willing to take me to a point where I could physically and emotionally understand what was going on, but he gave me the spiritual capacity to understand the greater picture. Why am I here? What purpose? He's always calling us to a greater purpose. And it was so pivotal for the growth of faith, both for the disciples and for us when we hit a major experience with God. And he was directing it for me. I knew right away. He didn't have to tell me who he was. But the disciples were overwhelmed they were fishermen, weren't they? All of them?
Some. But
Why were they overwhelmed they've been out on the sea fishing for years, since they were little boys. But they had become very dependent on Christ to understand the daily walk. But it was a very physical walk. They still hadn't grasped the whole spiritual point. But once Peter stepped out of the boat to walk, it hit them all very hard. I think it was an extremely important time in their spiritual growth and something they remembered all of their lives.
Amen.
They had an encounter with God, and that had to sink in for a while. Well, look at all of us. We have an encounter with God, and he's so gracious to provide that often. And I have to say that looking at all of us, I see God doing those things in our lives so that we become better equipped to minister and to love, to forgive, to undertake, and to just be his child. Well, you get to a point in your life where you think you've learned what you need to learn, and he's got new lessons. So we still are stepping out in faith. I want to be as much a spiritual being as I am a physical being. For me, that's the lesson.
That's great.
Thank you, Sherry. Well, that's a wonderful way to kind of take us to the end. I want to be aware of our timing, but I always love hearing your takeaways. Does anybody have just a short takeaway for you is from this week?
Take some alone time.
I'm stealing Diane's father-in-law's line of get out of the boat. Get out of the boat. That'll be a helpful word.
Can't walk on the water unless you got out of the boat. Yeah. We use that a lot now for something, we're contemplating whether or not we should do it. We're like, we getting out of the boat?
Good. Any other takeaways?
Well, like Sherry kind of said, that faith comes in different forms to different people.
Mm-hmm.
So we just have to be open to look for it.
Yeah. And it's okay to sink. To start sinking. Just, you got to get your eyes back on him.
Right. That's right.
Oh, man.
Be open to changing your opinion of someone. Don't always hold on to what you first had.
You all are just the best. You guys, I don't know about, you all make my week. You really do. Every week. I look forward to this time so much. Thank you for your wisdom that you share. This is always so good. in just a few moments, we'll have a closing prayer, but I'm wondering if we can stick around for just one more minute after the prayer. I just want to ask a quick question about logistics and scheduling. And next week, so you know, we'll be on Matthew 15, verses 1 through 20. But would anybody be willing to pray us out?
I will, Steve. Oh, Barb, will you?
Huh? What?
Were you going to pray?
No, you go ahead. I did it last week. Missed it.
Okay, I'll pray. Precious Lord, you create opportunities in our lives to help us grow so that we can be of service to you, but also as a blessing so that we can minister in love to our family and friends. You create in us a spirit of love, and we just thank you so much for that. The lessons we learn are so significant, Lord. Let us not overlook those. Thank you for this opportunity to worship together, to talk and share. And thank you so much for Steve's ministry to us. And I thank you so much for the faith of these believers. They encourage me and exhort me, and I find that I'm changed because of it. Thank you, Lord, for all you do. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.